Hi, I'm Cathy. I'm the town clerk here in Hanover, and I've been the town clerk for 5 years. So the town clerk in Hanover actually does the same thing that town clerks do all over New England. It's a statutorily authorized position. There are about 73 chapters and 451 sections of the law that dictate what I do, along with all of my neighboring town clerks all over the Commonwealth. Most common things that I end up doing will depend on the time of the year. This time of the year is election season. The general election is coming up on November 6th. So we are full in, 100% all election all the time. It's a very different job in that respect. It depends on the season, depends on what's pending, and it changes every day. No day is the same. So I am in fact the chief election official for the town of Hanover. As such, I hire, fire, supervise the 70 some odd election workers in town, train them, make sure that they're ready to administer the election along with me. So you name it, from soup to nuts. We're setting up before elections, we're training prior to the elections. If there's any new changes to the law, we'll add those to our repertoire of understanding. And then we literally are making sure that we're providing democracy to residents by administering the election. The 70 people who work for me actually are employed. They are paid employees, they're not volunteers. We are always recruiting in the sense that the position is always available. So if anybody has any interest in applying, all they need to do is go to the selectman's office, fill out an application. We'll keep it on file, and then we'll go through a brief interview process. I like to bring in my wardens, some of the next in line election officials come in and help me with that process too. So any Massachusetts resident over the age of 18 is eligible to be registered to vote. And actually I should clarify that, because there's a new law that just went into effect a couple of years ago that allowed 16 and 17-year-olds to pre-register to vote. So they can pre-register. They obviously can't vote until election day, but they can pre-register and get on the rolls. So there's essentially 3 different ways that you could vote in this upcoming election. You can vote absentee if you qualify. You can vote early, the 2 weeks prior to the election, or you can actually vote on election day if in fact you are a registered voter. Absentee voting is for folks who are eligible because they are either planning to be absent from the town of Hanover on election day while the polls are open, which is 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. So just because you've got, an early commute, that's fine, but if you're home by 7, you still can go to the polls by 8, so that you are not eligible for an absentee ballot in that case. Or if you are physically unable to get to the polls, so if you are housebound or your car broke down and you don't foresee it's going to be fixed before you get to election day. And then the third issue is if you have a religious observance that prevents your ability to attend on election day. Those 3 things are what qualify you to be an absentee voter. You can come into my office at any time, actually 6 months prior to the election if you know you're going to be out of town. Fill out an absentee ballot application. The ballots themselves are typically ready about 3 or 4 weeks prior to the election. We would mail it to you. You'd have to mail it back to us, or you can drop it off too. And then early voting is new. As of 2016, it was brand new. New legislation that was passed by the legislature allowed people to vote early for the first time. And it's open to anyone. So it's essentially no excuse absentee voting. Anybody can come for those 2 weeks, starting in this year, October 22nd through November 2nd, are the 2 weeks of early voting. The early voting has to be open while the building's open, so during normal town hall hours, which are Monday, Tuesday, Thursday from 8 to 4, Wednesday from 8 to 8, and Friday from 8 to noon. Plus, additionally, we're adding some optional hours this year. On Saturday, it happens to be the 27th of October, from 10 to 2. And then, of course, finally, there's election day. I mean, I'm a traditionalist when it comes to voting. I won't vote during early voting. I'll vote on election day, even though I'm going to be here the whole time. So it's just, election day is not like anything else. And I think we have a special brand of elections in Hanover in the sense that it's a very welcoming, collegial, conversational, social kind of an atmosphere. It's one of the highlights, I think, of the year for me personally. It's a fun day. Day in and day out, I think that's one of the things that I really like about my job is that no day is the same. Every day is different. You name it. From licensing dogs, raffles, flammable storage tanks. I am the keeper of the record, which means many things. but I like to think of it as particularly the historical records of the town. So I have in my vault the 1727 original records of the first town meeting in Hanover. I'm also the keeper of vital records, which are births, marriages, and death records. And you know, there are so many things that happen throughout the course of the year. We do the census. It's a timely item to think about starting in January. I am responsible for the administration of the census. The registrars assist me with that process. And it's a 4 to 5 month long undertaking. It's a big job. I like to characterize my job as I don't run the town, but I help the town run. So people, when they're first coming to town, for instance, we issue welcome packets. If you're a new resident in town, we mail you a welcome packet after we get a record of your house sale. If you are a new public official to town, if you're signing up for a committee or joining some sort of you've become a member of the Board of Selectmen. In my office, we swear people in. We make sure that you're apprised of the various laws, like the conflict of interest law and the open meeting law, so that you're prepared to undertake those responsibilities seriously. My assistant and I sort of joke with each other that we tend to be the switchboard. We tend to be the first office that people call when they're looking for information about the town. In the 5 years that I've been the town clerk, the town has wrestled with the issue of whether the town clerk should be appointed or elected 3 times, and twice before that. It's definitely a challenging question, but we have thus far, as long as I've been town clerk, and obviously for the 200 some odd years before that, we've always had elected town clerks. So as such, I report to you as a resident of Hanover. I don't report to the town manager or to the selectman or to somebody else down the hall. I report to the voters of Hanover. So I'm an elected town clerk. In the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, it's about 2/3, 1/3. About 2/3 of town clerks are elected and 1/3 are appointed. So it's certainly a possibility for the town of Hanover in the future. It wouldn't surprise me if we have the discussion again. But at this point, the town has decided that because we want to make sure that the town clerk is insulated from political influence, it's important that the town clerk report to just the voters and not to somebody whose election she may be running. I certainly never woke up when I was a little girl saying, I want to grow up to be a town clerk someday. It's not something that you think of as a career path, right? My background is in education, but really I think that my background in terms of my qualifications for this position were 20 some odd years of community service. I loved every minute of my time raising my children, and in the process of doing that, was very fortunate that I was able to participate on school councils, and I was an election worker. I volunteered in the town clerk's office actually for a little while. I was a part of the HHS Yes campaign, the campaign that built the new high school, or got the vote to pass to build the new high school. So I spent hundreds, thousands of hours of my time volunteering for my community for the 20 some odd years prior to my election in 2013. And really for me, it was just a very natural path. I kind of fell into it backwards. The former town clerk was retiring. I was looking for full-time employment. I was working as a volunteer in the building and as an paid election worker. And I just thought, you know what, it's a win-win. It's meant to be. The timing is perfect, and I was delighted to do so. And it's funny because as a former educator, I find that so much of what I do in my job today is still very much an educational piece. I'm still teaching the average resident, here's how you early vote. I'm teaching my staff, my election workers, here's how you administer an election. Here's how you get a dog license. Here's, so much of what I'm doing on a day-in and day-out basis still is a very, there's an educational piece to it. So and obviously community service too. What is the deal with election signs? So election signs are regulated by town bylaw. The town bylaw related to political signs was enacted in 1974. The town's bylaw has been amended at least a couple of times that I'm aware of in the time that I've lived in Hanover, probably more than that, but we have not touched the political sign section. The bylaw states that election signs can go up 3 weeks prior to the election, and they have to come down 3 days after the election. Sometime in the last 5 years, the Supreme Court decision came down called Reed versus Gilbert. Essentially, it would challenge our current bylaw. It would challenge the restriction in terms of time, the 3 weeks prior and the 3 days after. It would challenge whether or not we're okay with restricting people to having only one sign per candidate per lot. And if you look at the Reed versus Gilbert decision, you look at our bylaw, which existed long before the Supreme Court decision, I think you would have a very good town meeting discussion about whether or not our bylaw is still constitutional. I think it's up for debate, and I think it would be a very healthy debate, and I would look forward to that conversation. I think it's really easy to be involved in town, but it's also really hard. I think if you are engaged in town, and maybe you've got kids in the schools, or you've work in town or work locally, you might have your fingers in some various pies, and you would understand how to volunteer for HYAA, or as a member of the Community Access and Media Committee, or whatever those interests are for you personally. But if you're not a part of those groups yet, and you don't know how those groups work, I absolutely encourage people to come knock on my door. My door is always open, so like I said, don't even have to knock. Just come on in. The counter's right wide open. I think there are so many different outlets and so many potential ways for people to be involved in town. And it really comes down to what's of interest to you, because I can name 100 if we sat here and thought about it. Town government committees can be created any number of ways. Usually they are already existing. Most town committees are pretty stable, but the town meeting can actually establish a committee. So I'd say maybe an average of one a year. Town meeting will establish a new committee of some sort or another. The Community Access Media Committee is a relatively new committee. It's only been around for a few years. But that doesn't mean that the Board of Selectmen, for instance, when they were hiring the new town manager, created a committee on their own without town meeting authorization or approval, because they didn't need it, that was going to be a committee that reported to them. So it was a subcommittee of the Board of Selectmen. It was a very competitive process to be on that committee, even though it was not one that was established by town meeting. So I think sometimes there are committees that are existing, sometimes they're created at town meeting, and sometimes they come out of the blue. So as the town clerk, I think one of the obvious things I do is that I swear people in. So they come to me, they have an appointment letter from the town moderator or the Board of Selectmen or what have you, and I swear them in. They fill out an oath card. I make sure they have information about the conflict of interest law and the open meeting law. That's my primary responsibility when it comes to committees. I don't have any committees within my office, for instance. Interestingly, the only meeting that I have to attend is town meeting. And I have a very specific role at town meeting. As the keeper of the record, I am the keeper of the town meeting record. I don't write the original articles because those come from other committees and other boards and what have you. But that document that gets produced after town meeting is an amalgamation of all of those efforts. And I get to pick and choose the things that I get involved in. Again, as the keeper of the record, of the historical record in the town, I think it's important for me to stay on top of what's being talked about in town related to the town's history. When I first started as the town clerk in Hanover, all meetings, open meetings of committees and boards, had to be posted 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, available for all citizens to reference. And it was literally posted on a bulletin board outside my office that you could come up to the outside of town hall, at 10 o'clock at night, even though the building was closed, and you could, shine your flashlight probably and look at what the bulletin board said. So when I first got here 5 years ago, that was how people found out about meetings in Hanover. Talk about old school and not user-friendly. I would say probably one of the accomplishments that I'm most proud of was when we moved from that paper and bulletin board process to the online process. So I was lucky enough to work with the selectman and the town manager at the time to make sure that when we switched over to our new website, the website that the town now has was able to integrate all of that information. So let's say the Community Preservation Committee was having a meeting. Michaela Schumacher, the woman who's the liaison to that committee, the administrative liaison, all she has to do is type that in. She can do it from the comfort of her home. okay, the Community Preservation Committee is meeting next Wednesday, and here's the agenda, and it's right online, and it's the easiest thing ever. So, I think that town government, in terms of its availability and openness and ability for people to find out what's going on, is now accessible to the residents because of that change. The woman who runs the Mom on the Go food truck, June Summers. You might not know her personally, but perhaps you've heard of the truck anyway, right? I didn't know June 5 years ago, but she came into my office with her then fiance, and did her marriage intentions. That was part of, that's part of what the town clerk does. Hadn't met her before that day, but she was delightful. We were chit-chatting, but somehow they left their marriage intentions and their license in my office, and they were getting married the next day. And the building was locked, of course, and so I, busted right on over here to Town Hall, grabbed her marriage license, brought it over on a Saturday, put it in her mailbox. You would have thought that I gave her $1 million, right? It was the easiest thing on the planet, but I was happy to do it. 5 years ago, brand new town clerk. And I know that I'm the keeper of the record, and I know that the historic records they fall under my bailiwick, so to speak. And I go digging in the basement one day, and I find a safe, right? And it's a really old safe, and I know nothing about safes, but it looks really old to me. And I go to flip the handle, and it's locked. And I think, what's in there? Buried treasure, town records. I'm in charge of the historical record. What if there's some records from the 1700s in there? And so, my mind gets going, and I think, well, we've got to figure out what's in that safe. The Hanover lock, right here in Hanover, and I just, knocked on their door and said, what do you guys think? Can you check it out? And as it turns out, that one of the gentlemen who works and owns the Hanover lock is a world-famous safe cracker. So he gives me an assessment of what he thinks might be going on there. One day we cracked the safe and had his tools out, and it was really kind of a fun thing. And we got all excited, and we taken pictures of the grand opening, and it's empty. The beauty of the story is that we then took that safe. He was able to re-key it, relock it, and we now have repurposed the safe. And it's now where the 1727 records are stored. So much of my job is dictated by Massachusetts state law. And as I said earlier, 451 sections of the law say something about the town clerk. So the breadth and the depth of Massachusetts laws that I need to know in order to do my job is just astonishing. But I love it. I love the law I've learned in the time that I've been in the job. Maybe I should have been an attorney. It's been a challenge. It's been hard. I read the law sometimes, and I think I know what I'm doing, and then I turn around and read another section of the law, and there's this whole other twist to it that I wasn't aware what even existed. So I would say that that's the most challenging, but also my favorite part of the job. I love that it's a challenge. I love the investigative piece of digging into it and trying to figure out what's, what it is that we need to do in order to do things right. I'm here for the residents. This job is a continuation of my community service, 27 years worth of community service here in Hanover. I just happen to get paid for it now. And am I doing anything different? I don't think so. I have an always open door. People know where I live. And I'm more than happy to serve my residents. So whatever you need, if you don't know who to call, we're the switchboard. I'll look forward to connecting with people and being of service.